We're going to get started. So I'm Barry Spielman, Product Marketing Director for Security Products at Allot, and I'm very excited to be hosting this webinar today. The home has truly become the epicenter of our digital environment. And in today's expanding cyber threat landscape, all of your customers and their connected homes are target. From PCs, tablets, smartphones, IoT devices, to the router itself that provides the connectivity. And many consumer-grade smart appliances are vulnerable, and the digital doorway to attack the home network is wide open. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So in today's webinar, we'll be discussing the problem and how to secure the digital doorways into your users' homes. And I'm very pleased to have with me today Patrick Donegan, founder and principal analyst at the research and analysis company Hardin Stance, and Angel Fernandez, AVP Security Solutions at Allot. Patrick, Angel, thank you so much for joining me. It's great to have you with me.
Thank you.
So in a moment, we'll get started with the webinar, but before I do, like we usually do on these webinars, I want to just go over some housekeeping items. So first of all, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand on the resources section of the Allot website under webinars. Now, we will be having a live Q&A at the end of this webinar today. So I invite you to ask questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A window on the right side of the screen. There's a little button here which says Q&A. Go in there and you can ask the questions, and we'll answer as many as we can at the conclusion of the session. I also want to point out that we will be sending you a white paper written by Patrick Donegan from Hardin Stance on home router security. This is an updated version of a previous white paper that Patrick put out a couple of years ago. And so you will be getting that. It's a very important document. Patrick, I'm going to turn it over to you. Okay, yours.
Thank you very much indeed, Barry. If I could have the first slide.
Yeah, actually, I forgot. All right, what's not working here? I forgot to show this slide, folks. That's on me. That should have been up during the polls, but that's just who we are. Okay, so anyway, Patrick, it's yours. Just give me the heads up when we're moving slides.
Thanks very much indeed. Okay, so let us begin by defining a little bit what we mean by a digital doorway. We're, of course, referring to another way of looking at it is digital gateway. We're referring to the home router and the role that occupies at the, I think you said, the epicenter, Barry, of our digital lives. So as this chart suggests, our experience in the pandemic over the course of the last 18 months has changed the way we use data and applications in the home. Those of us that were using online applications before the pandemic are now consuming them very, very, very much more. We all know anecdotally amongst our friends and family, we now know great swathes of members of our family, members of the older generation, using Zoom and Skype in a manner that they simply weren't before the pandemic. So our dependence on those tools and all of the intimate sharing of things that we do, both on text, video, and audio in those apps, has made us all very much more vulnerable to sharing data and to having that data exploited by bad actors. We are all in some way or another using, we're much more dependent now on online education. Our children have become much more used to using education tools online. It's, I think if you think before the pandemic, we might have been a little bit concerned about our kids being vulnerable to online scams and data protection issues from their gaming platforms. But I think we probably take it even more seriously when their education is at risk of being disturbed. Many of us are now using online medical consultations a great deal more than we were. Think of the sort of data that we're sharing. In some cases, the images, verbally, we're sharing incredibly intimate information in online medical consultations that we wouldn't have dreamed of doing before the pandemic. There was a survey by IBM Security that they released just a few weeks ago. And they found that on average, over the course of the pandemic, on average, households increased their number of new accounts by 15. On average, people increased the number of online accounts they hold by 15 over the course of the pandemic. Moreover, 82% of those users admitted to reusing passwords across all those new accounts, at least to some extent. So our dependence on our home networks, our sharing and usage of data and applications is substantially greater than it was before the pandemic. Certainly, now, one can say that that trend was already in play before the pandemic. Absolutely it was. But I think the pandemic has certainly accelerated that trend and driven us to a greater level of dependency faster than we were previously on track to go. So if I can have the next slide, Barry.
Without a question. Yeah, here you go.
Thank you. Now, I think at least some of that shift to a greater dependency on the home is permanent. Now that the genie is at least partially out of the bottle, now that we've started using online medical consultations, previously many of us would have thought there's no chance I'm saying or talking about that, with a video link. I need to be on my doctor's premises. We have become more used to doing that kind of thing now. So to some extent, we are going to be using online medical consultations and online medical applications more than we have in the past. There is something of a permanent shunt has occurred there. And I think it's similar with education. Certainly many students, most students perhaps, are looking forward to going back to their campuses, going back to their school premises. And of course, so much education is very much about that personal experience. However, by the same token, we know the convenience of online education. We've learned the convenience of being able to access a course, a lecture when we want to, rather than when we have to. So again, some part of that shift towards dependency on home is permanent. I think this is also reflected in this chart here, which is a survey undertaken by PwC of US employers and their attitude to people working from home. And I think this shows really quite nicely just the sort of the balance that the axis, the center of gravity of our attitudes has moved. What you see here is, at the top here, a proportion of employers take the view that, okay, it's all about the remote working. We love it. We want to move there. We're not turning back. At the bottom, you have a segment of employers that say, actually, we do need to go back to exactly where we were, not terribly keen on remote working. And then in the middle there, you've got a segment that says, well, we'll take a little of both. We'll have a little bit of a more permanent use of remote working, but we'll still have a lot of office working as well. That, I think, sums up quite neatly where we are as a society.
Patrick, it's interesting because, we've all been in this situation. It's one of those things that all around the world, everyone's going through. But here, a lot of us were working in the office a lot of the times. And all of a sudden, all these people are coming back to work that haven't been here before, they haven't been here in a long time. Who are these guys? They're invading our space. But I must have to get used to working with folks again in the office. But I think for many of us, our social skills are bound to have gotten a little bit rusty, I'm sure. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Moving
Next slide, please, Barry.
There you go.
So then add to that we are adding more and more IoT things into our homes. That's been continuing, ongoing in the pandemic. And an Ipsos Mori survey for the UK government found that over the first 6 months of the pandemic, I think it was from March to October or so, over that 6-month period, the average UK household added an additional 2 IoT things into their smart home. So we are piling on more and more devices into our homes. In many cases, most cases, they're poorly secured. And on top of that, in many cases, these IoT things are doing things that the users who bought them don't really properly understand and aren't able to protect themselves about. If you look, for example, at the recent launch by Amazon of Sidewalk, which is their own wireless protocol that enables given devices, light bulbs, locks, sensors, to communicate with one another. It shares a little bit of network, a little slice, if you will, of available Wi-Fi network between these devices, all with a view to giving a better user experience. However, that also opens up a new threat vector. And of course, because they're Amazon, there's no, you're not invited as to whether you want to participate in Sidewalk or not. The basically model is that you are de facto opted in, which puts the emphasis, the onus on the user to opt out, which requires, first of all, that the user has heard of Sidewalk in the first place. Second of all, recognizes the potential risk to them arising from it. Then it requires that they find out how to opt out. And then, of course, it requires that they do it. So there's just to say here that the increasing complexity of the smart home environment is creating another an exaggerated threat vector to the household as well. So if I could have the next slide, Baron. We are a lot more distracted now. We are all, I think, still, even countries like the UK and Israel and the US, which are, highly vaccinated, we're still worried about the pandemic and the new variants. We know what difficulties it's causing. Many of us have attended the funerals of friends and family. Many of us have actually been unable to attend the funerals of friends and family. There's the pandemic itself. Unfortunately, at this point in time, there are a lot of other problems in the world. We have a tremendous problem of fake news, which is causing a lot of concern around the world. We have China and the US not being terribly friendly to one another, and actually, causing substantial political concerns about the future of global cooperation in all sorts of areas. We have extreme weather events driven by climate change, causing very real disaster left, right, and center. That's at the sort of high end of things. On the lesser end of things, I don't know about you, but I'm just a bit more forgetful these days. And I don't think it's a function of advancing middle age. It's quite well known that the function of isolation that's caused by the lockdowns that have been mandated does cause elements of memory loss. And we know this to be true. It's demonstrably true.
And now I know what to tell my wife, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
On my case for memory loss.
So, we know this anecdotally amongst ourselves, but there's also some hard data for it. The US Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, recently reported that during the period from August 2020 to February 2021, the percentage of US adults with symptoms of anxiety or a depressive order during the previous 7 days increased by 5%, from 36.4% to 41.5%. I think we know it anecdotally, but the data also demonstrates it. And this amount of anxiety, distraction, call it what you will, is precisely what online internet scammers are looking for. They want us to be distracted. When we are distracted, we find it hard to concentrate. We're at our most vulnerable. Our cybersecurity hygiene drops, and they are in a much better position to exploit us as a consequence of the state of mind that many of us find ourselves in. So if I could have the next slide, please, Barry. So yes, as I mentioned, so the scammers, the bad actors are having, let's face it, let's call it what it is, they're having an absolutely terrific pandemic. Having so many of us at home, distracted, worried, concerned, as I mentioned, it's been a field day for the scammers, and it is continuing to be. So we've seen all sorts of the usual scams, but obviously many have been themed with pandemic-related lures. So we've had initially a lot of there were a bunch of both email and SMS phishing and smishing scams featuring themes around being able to get protective personal equipment, PPE. That then involved faux, fake contact tracing messages telling you that you needed to do this or you needed to do that, and above all, you needed to click on this link. That also morphed into notifications of government fines for breaching lockdown rules. We've seen a great many of them. More recently, that emphasis has switched to promising people early access to vaccines. Again, click here and you're in a whole bunch of trouble. And of course, not directly related to the pandemic, but reflecting the fact that we are all spending a great deal more time at home. We've seen a bunch of home delivery notification scams that your driver tried to deliver this for you earlier today. Click here to find out how you you can retrieve your package. So the next slide, please, Baron. And I just want to say something here about the impact of these attacks, these scams, and how they affect people. And I think, you know, sometimes there is a tendency to say, well, look, okay, sometimes you get scammed and you end up either, you know, clicking on a link and you end up paying, you know, €5 on your account. Maybe you get on your mobile phone account, for example, or your home network account. Maybe it's a recurring £5 a month, and all you have to do is phone your service provider, and they can switch that off for you, and you've only lost a few pounds. And there's a sort of position that says, well, okay, well, it's a nuisance, but it's not that big of a deal. I think it's also worth considering, you know, some of the higher end impacts, some of the far bigger, more devastating impacts, the kinds of things such as, for example, when you are in the proceeds of trying to buy a house, and your information, your personal information has been hijacked, has been taken over by bad actors, and they work against you. They monitor you in the background, and at the point where you are due to send either a deposit of several £1,000s, euros, dollars, or even, God forbid, the full amount, they've hijacked you and sent you to a rogue link where you input the deposit amount or the full amount, and you get taken down in that way. Now, again, you might say, well, surely a lot of people get their money back, don't they? Yes, that is true. But two things about that. Not everybody does. You know, there are no terribly clear rules within many countries, let alone between different countries, about what an appropriate level of compensation is. So some people are getting compensated, some are not. Even if you do get compensated, you know, I do not want to be the person that's waiting for 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks to find out if I'm going to get my money back, my €10,000, my $12,000, my £6,000. You know, I have no interest in being that person. And even if I am kind of cool-headed enough to go, it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine. Is my partner, is my spouse equally as relaxed as me? Quite possibly not. So I think it's important to understand some of the impacts that go with these things. So next slide, please, Barry. It's a little bit of a cliche, but all cybersecurity is a team sport. And, you know, there are several stakeholders. There's government, there's industry, there's the internet companies, there's the service providers, there's us as consumers. Yes, we've had recently the G7 for the first time ever make a declaration around the need to act on ransomware. Not seen that before. And you might go, hey, that's terrific, government's doing something. Well, okay, first of all, you could say it's a little bit late. And second of all, you could also say, okay, well, when are we going to actually see some meaningful, impactful actions that are going to resolve that? Here in Europe, the UK and German governments have been acting in terms of stipulating new legislation that mandates that new IoT things must meet a certain security standard. And again, that's all completely fantastic, great, well done. But it's a small piece of the puzzle. You know, mandating that IoT things sold must meet a certain security standard. That's terrific, but how's that going to filter through into the, you know, the 29 IoT things in my home? How many years will it take to change out those old ones and put those new ones in? Even when even when those new ones are in, I can still, if I insist, as a consumer, decide to put a non-compliant device in, and there's my vulnerability right there. The business community is doing it, is playing its part. In the bottom right there, you can see Aviva, you know, putting ads on their own homepages, warning people against fake investment bond sites. So they're doing their little bit there. In the cybersecurity industry. There is no hotter acronym today than SASE, Secure Access Services Edge, and that does provide some element of remote home security. It's kind of cool, but don't forget that the role of SASE is to protect the enterprise's own assets from threats in the home. SASE doesn't protect the home network itself. It doesn't protect the employee's spouse. It doesn't protect the employee's children. It doesn't protect the employee's home router. It is there to protect the employer. So it really doesn't do very much at all for the broader household security. Google and Facebook, I think a lot of people think that the internet companies, the hyperscalers, should be doing a great deal more than they are to protect against some of these issues. We have a slightly or very ludicrous situation at this point where in some countries, Google is taking advertising from scammers, hosting the scammers' ads, and then they're also, with the other hand, taking money from governments to post warnings against consumers being taken in by those very same scammers' ads that they themselves are hosting. It's what you might call the perfect two-sided business model. That said, it's not terribly perfect from mine and your point of view as consumers, and really they should be taken to task and required to do more about that. Those two folks in the corner there, the lady and gentleman, that's you and me. You and I have a responsibility, a substantial responsibility as for our own home security to ensure best practice cybersecurity hygiene. But that said, we are all human. We are all vulnerable. I'm not willing to say that there's no chance of me not making a mistake. I think I can make a mistake. I think if you're realistic, I think you probably can as well. So it's all about layers and all about having different parts of the team playing their part. So if I could have the next slide, Barry. About the digital doorways. So let's keep this simple. The market in home router equipment is large and diverse. They range from the very good, the very secure, to the really rather poor and rather very insecure. Let's be even simpler. Let's be more straightforward and recognize that actually a lot of home router equipment out there in people's homes is crap. It's dreadful. It's horribly insecure. They're optimized for lowest cost, maximum performance, maximum convenience, maximum rapid time to market, and they're very vulnerable. This here is an example of research undertaken by Which, the consumer magazine in the UK, which, by the way, is a highly respected research organization, and they found the probability of millions of UK home routers being too old to support security updates, etc. You gain access to a home router and you can potentially see any traffic running across that network and execute any number of different attacks. That could be eavesdropping, altering DNS settings to send users to a rogue imitation of a familiar website, downloading malware infected versions of legitimate software, serving up unwanted ads, corrupting the integrity of messages between devices in the network. This is the consumer's digital doorway. Next slide, please, Barry. Or as Orange choose to call the home router in a current marketing campaign of theirs, the router of all evil. I did actually notice that it's a phrase that's been used before. It's not original to Orange, but it's still a damn good phrase and very, very pertinent to the world that we live in and trying to address some of the problems that we're seeing. It's the router of all traffic, of course, the router of great traffic that we all depend on and love, but it's also the router of all evil. So let's have the next slide, please, Barry. So let's come back then to that familiar team sport theme around cybersecurity, and let's have a look at how the communication service provider, or ISP, is positioned to address the problem for users. Telcos are well positioned to support users with education around cybersecurity hygiene. They're well positioned to support router product design, in many cases specifying them. They're well placed to participate in the router firmware updates. Many play in the antivirus software space, bundling it in as a service or offering it as a premium service. And of course, when it comes to network security, telcos and ISPs are uniquely able to carry out the blocking of unauthorized access to the home network, restricting the tasks that a home router is able to perform, and two-factor authentication to limit use of permitted communications between those devices. Now, Angel is going to talk a little bit more about how Allot is working with a number of leading service providers in terms of addressing these issues and bringing greater security to the home network environment. But I think the phrase I used there was leading service provider. I think the challenge with home network security is one that I mentioned, that people wanting to take the initiative and drive this change is hampered by different stakeholders having different agendas. Candidly, each market has its own specific characteristics, and in a low-income market where you have an ISP that's playing in the low-income segment of that low-income market, cobbling together the business case for greater home security is a lot more challenging than in the case of more advanced telcos and ISPs and in other markets. So I think, in my mind, that doesn't mean that those end users in those markets served by those other ISPs don't deserve the same kind of protection that we're offering in leading markets. I think it fundamentally boils down to an analogy around clean water, safe electricity. We've come to expect that our water will be clean, that our electricity will be safe, and I think we need to be looking at a similar outlook towards the way that we use our home networks and throwing every layer of security at these problems that we possibly can, including network security, which is obviously a key area where the ISP can play. So I think that concludes my comments for now, Barry.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that analysis, and let's move over quickly to Angel to get the Allot perspective.
Please move to the next slide, and thank you, Patrick, for all your introduction. From the Allot perspective, I believe we are fully aligned with the landscape that Patrick introduced. Threats on the internet, attacks, and so on has been around for a long time now, but there are a number of events, COVID being one of them, working from home, and many other dimensions that really turn the focus of attackers from the traditional enterprise market, being this target of attacks, more to the consumer and the SMB market, with one big difference. While enterprises have the resources, the money, and the time to invest in order to protect themselves, the situation is drastically different in the consumer and the SMB market, and as such, they do not have the time, the resources, or really the bandwidth and the understanding and the knowledge to protect themselves, and as such, they need to look for someone else to provide this type of solutions. Let me start with some figures, and Barry, please move to the next slide. This shows something that is not new to anyone. I mean, attacks, being malware, phishing, applications which are infected or are not behaving as they're supposed to be behaving, is not something new in the market. What we see, as Patrick said, and we concluded as well as part of our independent surveys, is that most of these attacks are right now targeting the consumer market, especially during these COVID times, and we expect that this continues to increase once 5G is widely spread and once remote working or working from home has become like the default or the de facto type of working relationship with your employer. Move to the next slide, please. But one of the things that is very relevant, and we as Allot have conducted surveys with more than 11,000 different participants, is these consumers, what do they understand and expect about security? So first finding is that most of them, and we're talking of the top 60s or even 70% in the US in this case, are really worried about some type of attacks, either identity threats or any type of malware or phishing and so on. So they're really aware of the need of being protected. But at the same time, the vast majority, and here we're talking of about 90%, when they think of who should be the provider of this type of security solutions, they think of the ISP, the one that provides the connectivity to the internet, as the main provider of these security solutions for them. So we have the awareness, and we have these consumers thinking of the CSP as the one to provide this type of security solutions. So move to the next slide, please, Barry. Some of the learnings out of these surveys is that, as well, there's a big majority of these users or consumers who are willing to pay, depending on whether it's mobile or fixed connectivity, they're willing to pay for this type of security. So again, this becomes like a huge opportunity for CSPs who will be able to leverage this opportunity, this awareness and this willingness to pay, and to make a nice revenue out of all these opportunities. So move to the next one, please. So why the CSP? The CSP is in a unique position in order to make good revenue out of those of these opportunities, need of security in the consumer market, for two main reasons. One more technical, the other one more marketed or positioning point of view. From a technical perspective, the CSP is the one that provides the connectivity for the consumer, and as such, it has the technical capabilities to protect the user from all the threats out there in the internet. And it goes in all the flow from the device that I'm using to the threat in the internet. So I have the technical ability as a CSP to provide protection in the core of the network or the router or the endpoint or any other step between the user and the threat in the internet. As such, no one else has this capability other than the CSP. From the positioning perspective, the CSP has multiple touch points with the customer. From a billing perspective, from advertisement perspective, there are many places, there are many touch points in which the CSP can promote security to the user, asking the end user to opt in, showing the threats on the internet, showing how the CSP and the security solutions offered by the CSP can really provide protection for the consumer. As such, there's no one else like a CSP with all these multiple touch points and such the ability to promote these security services for the consumer. Move to the next slide, please. Okay, so we as Allot, obviously we are on the vendor side, so we are the partner of the CSP so that the CSP can create a really good revenue, a really good market out of the security solutions. So the first thing that we did in Allot is try to understand this consumer market. What are these consumers asking for? What are their real needs? So move to the next slide. And as such, what we identified out of different surveys with consumers, with CSPs, which are our customers, with CSPs, which are not our customers, is that we can summarize the need of the consumer market in terms of security in these main bullets. First thing that the consumer is looking for is, give me a security solution that protects me anywhere against any threat and against any device. I, as a consumer, I'm not technology savvy, let's say. I don't want to deal with the complexity of the technology. I don't want to deal with different products. I don't want to deal with different type of accesses to the internet. I just want to be protected. As such, I want something that we can call end-to-end protection. Protect me against anything, against, nope, not yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, my bad.
No problem. So protect me end-to-end. Let's call this 360. I don't want to care. I don't want to be aware of again all this complexity. I want to be protected. I will look for this type of solutions from the CSP, as we concluded before in the previous slides. But something as well important is I want to manage this by myself. I want to be the center of this security experience. So don't ask me to call someone to configure something for me. I want to do it I want to do it easy. I want to do it by myself. I want to get reports by myself. I want to create my configurations by myself, but please make it easy for me. And finally, this zero touch clientless statement. What it means is basically, I want to be protected by default. If I want to improve my security experience, maybe I'll be willing to do something by myself. But by default, give me a security level that is enough, that does not require me to install, configure anything, that comes by default without me not even clicking one thing. And as such, please now, next slide. We created an ecosystem of security products.
Hold on. Oh, now it's not working. There you
go. Okay, you can move to the next one, please.
Did that already.
Okay. And as such, we create an ecosystem of security products, which are the ones shown on the slide, on the lower side of the slide, which are providing security in different enforcement points from the CSP and end user perspective. So we do have some products which are providing security from the core of the operator network, from the core of the CSP, either analyzing traffic inline or analyzing DNS traffic. We have security products which are providing security from the router itself, which is the core of the presentation today, is something called HomeSecure as a product for the consumer market, or we even have products which provide security for the endpoint itself, the endpoint that I will install in my Android, iOS, Windows, Mac, and so on. But what we concluded from the Allot perspective is that if you are installing one or several of these products, you need to provide a unified view. So you can have security in the network, in the router, and the endpoint. Each one of them providing an additional layer of security, this concept of security by layers, which in which each product is enhancing the capabilities of the other product. But still, I want to see everything simple. I want to see everything unified. And as such, we create this concept of Allot Secure Management. What it means is that I can have one or several of these products, but I, as a consumer, I will not deal with the complexity of having different products. For me, is one single interface, one single security product, security policy, one single report. No complexity, but it's still all the strength, all the power of having as many security products assigned to myself from the CSP perspective. Right now, let's talk a little bit, and please move to the next slide, on HomeSecure. HomeSecure is one of the products in the Allot Secure portfolio. In this case, is a product that we deployed in the router that you might have at home as a consumer subscriber. So please move to the next one. The goal here is to protect this super connected home that we can have right now, where we have smart devices like my cell phone or PCs or media centers, but many other IoT devices. In many cases, we're not even aware of how many we have, which are accessing the internet, which we don't have any control of what type of security they have, because usually, as Patrick mentioned, performance and costs are usually optimized, and security is not taken into account when creating this type of devices. And as such, we have a household, which in the end is weak, because as soon as one of these devices becomes the door for an attacker, then my whole household is compromised, even though some other devices might be safe. And as such, we have created this product, which is HomeSecure. Please move to the next slide, which is addressing the need of securing my household, which is because of many different things, COVID and so on, has become like the center of my digital activity on the internet. So if this is a representation of the household, basically HomeSecure has three main components. The first one is an agent that we will be able to deploy in the router that you have at home, something that can be deployed remotely. So aligned with this no action from the user statement that we said before, the CSP will put this agent remotely on the HomeSecure router, on the router, and will start protecting your household. Then we have a set of servers in the cloud, which can be either Azure, Amazon, or the cloud of the operator itself, which contains the intelligence. It doesn't mean that the traffic needs to go from your household to this cloud. Basically, all the enforcement takes place in your router, but some metadata will be consulted over the server for fingerprinting, for specific threads which are not in the cache, and so on. And finally, there is an application, which is what we have on the left-hand side, which is the application or the web interface alternatively, which will allow the administrator of the household to configure the policies, to determine what is allowed, what is not allowed, to get the notifications, to see in one sentence what is the security of the household and enforce whatever policies we want to enforce. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are the three components. So what we can do from HomeSecure. From HomeSecure, again, we deploy it in the router and immediately we get a number of benefits. The first one is protection. We can provide protection against all type of threats on the internet, anti-malware, anti-phishing, anti-adware, anti-botnet, you name it. So all these threats, we will protect any of the assets which are connected to your router by means of HomeSecure. We can provide you an overall or overview of what's the security in your household. And not only that, we can identify different type of devices by means of fingerprinting and give you visibility what those devices are doing on the internet, and maybe conclude that this particular device is connecting to a server which is not supposed to be connected, and as such you can create some blocking rules. So let's say you minimize the risk around your house. All this is combined with very advanced, let's say, threat detection capabilities based on the threat intelligence team in a lot, based on machine learning algorithms and so on, which are providing the technical resources in order to implement all this protection for the user. Another dimension of HomeSecure is the parental control. Obviously, we will be able to specify parental control rules for your kids, for those devices which are assigned to your kids individually per each one of your kids based on age, based on categories. We can create allowed or block lists of domains as exceptions. We can create timetables. We can create schedules. We can even pause the internet for your kid. If you want your kid to come for dinner, then probably the best thing and the only thing you can do is block the internet for the little kid so he comes for dinner. So all these capabilities are embedded within HomeSecure the minute that this little agent is deployed on the router, and then you download this application and be able to manage the configuration of HomeSecure. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, security is about layers. So all these layers are contained within HomeSecure router. We start with something that we call reputation. So it's the ability to understand when someone or some device is trying to access something that is compromised, something that might be dangerous. So this is basically based on a specific threat databases that we have as part of the product, or some artificial intelligence or machine learning algorithms in order to understand what type of content is being accessed and whether this is dangerous or not dangerous. That, together with profiling, with fingerprinting and behavioral analysis, we are able to understand when some device is not behaving as it should. And therefore, we have the ability to basically isolate that device. But we go beyond that, and I will come onto that topic in a minute, by securing the CPE itself. If I'm securing all the devices, but I'm not securing the CPE, then I'm opening the door for an attacker to really penetrate my household and do whatever they want. So CPE protection is as well part of HomeSecure. Then IoT specific protection is part of HomeSecure as well, like blocking specific ports or blocking specific access to IoT devices, which, as we mentioned before, is a type of device which is not by nature very secure. And finally, on top of that, we even have the ability to inspect some traffic real time for malware which might be embedded in a compromised file or application. So all these layers are building one on top of the other in order to provide a comprehensive security in HomeSecure by protecting the CPE and all the devices which are connected to the CPE itself. So next one, please. Just a couple of words on the database itself. I mean, this is one of the cores of the Allot Secure portfolio, not specifically HomeSecure, but as well shared across all the portfolio. This database is something that we build ourselves by means of crawlers, by means of our threat intelligence team, by means of contributions from many other vendors that we have agreements with, machine learning, and many other activities in order to create a very comprehensive, robust, end-to-end, reliable database of threats, which allows us to identify potentially any threat out there in the internet and then mitigate the attack onto the devices, which are, in this case, protected by HomeSecure. Next one. As I mentioned before, securing the CPE is another big and important dimension of HomeSecure. If I'm protecting, let's say, all my devices, but I'm not protecting the CPE, then an attacker can, as Patrick mentioned before, can really change, for instance, the DNS resolution in the CPE. As such, what will happen is that I can be diverted into a fake website without me even realizing that. And as such, we have implemented a number of techniques in order to protect the router itself. DNS manipulation prevention is one of them, because this is an obvious attack. We can protect devices which have a weak password, so we can scan devices and identify when they have a weak password and notify the user or even isolate the device. We are implementing two-factor authentication. We are as well blocking the type of communication that the router by itself can do, and as such, preventing the router from being infected from someone. So in the end, it's a number of technologies that go beyond the pure protection of the device that is connected to the router, but as well considering the router as part of the asset, as part of the household security, and as such, transforming this router of evil that Patrick was mentioning into something that is reliable, and as such, can provide me a clean access to the internet end-to-end. Next slide, please. And one more. So just as a summary, what you can get or you get from HomeSecure is, first of all, security against all these threats on the internet. By means of reputation, by means of scanning real time or traffic real time, by protecting the router itself. You get digital printing. You get as well some tools within HomeSecure for troubleshooting purposes. This vision of what is the security of my household, as I mentioned before, HomeSecure will give you visibility of whether you have any issues, how to address them. We even provide a chatbot, which can be used by the CSP in order to prevent someone from calling the support lines of the CSP. So this is a chatbot that provides a real-time communication as part of HomeSecure with the end user. And it's able to solve some of the basic problems that I can have as a consumer, because I don't know a lot about technology. So this chatbot can guide me through the resolution of these problems. And next slide, please. This solution can be deployed virtually and on almost any router, which is a really good advantage of a lot. We provide as well the tools within HomeSecure for the CSP to have visibility on what's going on. So what's going on in terms of what type of devices are connected to my router, what kind of problems I can have. So all this CSP portal will give me full visibility on the problems that I can encounter. And finally, and this is important, is part of a unified solution. HomeSecure is just one of the components in the Allot Secure portfolio. As such, it can be deployed as standalone, but just as a reminder of the introduction that I made, is one component into this 360 security protection of Allot. So I can start from a CSP perspective with a product offering, which is only HomeSecure, and then start upselling additional security products and therefore security layers to my customers, still keeping this unified and simple view, simple management from the consumer perspective. And that's it on my side, I believe.
Okay, thank you, Angel, and also want to thank you, Patrick. We're getting to the top of the hour, and the truth is, I'd like to also share a quick testimonial interview that we did with Jio, a company, a large provider in India. That we Allot recently signed a huge deal for millions of routers, HomeSecure solution in India. It's a 4-minute clip. I already see some questions coming in, but I'm going to believe that we're not going to have time for these questions. And so what I'm going to suggest is that we keep sending them, and we will get back to all of you offline. What I will do here is, because I made the cardinal sin in in a Zoom webinar that I didn't share the audio. So I'm stopping the share for a second, and I am going to reshare, but this time I'm going to do it right and share the computer sound. So just bear with me for 1 second, and I'm going to show this video, and then I think we will conclude the webinar. But go ahead and continue to send in your questions because we will get back to you. Okay, so here we go.
Welcome, Mr. Yatin Acharya, Senior Vice President of Jio. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Nikki. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Now, Jio is one of the largest mobile operators in the world. Please share with us your vision for Jio's fixed network and service.
Well, Jio's larger vision is for a digital society for India, right? We want to ensure that every Indian has access to the state-of-the-art digital connectivity and services that are at par with or better than anywhere else in the world, right? We leverage on this whole data explosion part, concurrent with large volumes and criticality of data traffic and data-driven applications for individuals, government, businesses, enterprises, etc. Since our launch of the mobile service in 2016, within 4+ years, we have now 400 million plus subscribers. We have catapulted India from being just 1% of the global internet traffic to almost close to 20% of the global internet traffic today, right?
Okay, so really it's customer demand is driving this, and Jio's really stepping up to the plate to make sure that they're offering the most secure internet connectivity. Fantastic. So when looking for a technology partner to help you deliver on this promise of cybersecurity, how do you select your partners, and why did you select Allot?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. Jio chooses actually its partners very diligently. We consider the following traits in all our partners. First and foremost comes the technology, right? The technology has to be the next generation cutting edge technology. It has to be highly scalable in meeting our existing and growing demands, especially in a country like India. It should be nimble to execute a project in a swift and efficient manner. And there should be a very strong technical team having an immense amount of passion to deliver a large-scale project such as ours, and have a business attitude to really invest now and reap perpetually.
Jio is actually one of the largest or the largest operators in the world, is it not? Very close to second place. So this is going to be a huge, large-scale deployment. That's very exciting. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks a lot, Nikki. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Okay, folks. So really, we've reached the top of the hour. So at this point, I want to take the opportunity to thank Patrick Donegan, founder and principal analyst at the research and analysis company Hardin Stance. I want to thank Angel Fernandez, our AVP Security Solutions here at Allot. I also want to thank Mr. Yatin Acharya, Senior Vice President at Jio in India, for the interview. And I also want to thank all of you for taking your time out from your busy schedules to participate in the webinar. I want to remind you that it's recorded and be available on demand. I also want to remind you we're sending out the white paper that Patrick put together, which is an update of a previous one he did a couple of years ago. I also want to remind you that if you sent in questions, we will get back to you offline. And so with that, it brings us to the conclusion of today's event. Thank you all for joining us. Stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day.